Hi, I'm Mike Zipser, and I'm here in the studio with Bill Campbell, the head of Rosarium Publishing. Bill, welcome back to Fast Forward.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
So Rosarium's been around for what's like 3 years now?
Almost. June will be our official 3-year.
3-year anniversary, and they're doing pretty good. There's books out and more books coming out, and you're all over social media. You were trending on Twitter recently.
Yeah, twice now.
Yeah,
Twice now.
so that's very good.
It's very cute.
Yeah. And last time we talked about how you started Rosarium. I want to talk a little bit about some of what you've been publishing. You've had some really kind of groundbreaking anthologies out. One of those are Stories for Chip.
Right.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that one?
Samuel R. Delany is really the reason I started writing science fiction. This was around the time in college. You know, I was interested in science fiction, but not as a writer. I was in that school of thought that, you know, I wanted to be a serious literary, writer, and not realizing until I read Delany that the things that I wanted to talk about, politics, sociology, history, and those things, could very easily be encapsulated in science fiction. Like it was Delany that gave me that revelation. So I don't know how people feel about my writing at all, whether this was a good thing or a bad thing, but at least I wanted to say thank you. Because oftentimes we don't get the chance to say thank you to people while they're alive. And then when they're dead, we go, oh, this was so great. So I wanted to say thank you now. You know, it made sense to me.
Mm-hmm. And so you got an incredible group of writers to write stories,
Yes.
right? Kind of influenced.
Yes. Well, people love Chip. So it was a very easy solicitation.
Yeah, I can imagine. We had at least 2 of my absolute top favorite writers in the anthology. Yeah, Michael Swanwick and Nella Hopkinson.
Yes.
Who just blows me away, everything she writes.
No, it's one of those things that one day I'll look back and I'll just go, wow. That's the problem with being, a publisher, independent publisher, entrepreneur in general. You hardly ever get the chance to stop and go, wow, I just did something. So, people say, wow, you did something, and I'll say thank you and go to like the thousands of other things I have to do that day. But it does touch me. When I gave the book to Chip, I almost cried. Actually, I kind of did cry, but yes.
Manly crying.
It wasn't manly.
No,
it was little baby crying.
Yeah. And a great cover on it too, by the way.
John Jennings.
Oh yeah,
my boy.
that's right.
Did the Mothership cover.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
He did the APB cover.
Yep.
Yes.
Which as long as you brought that up, he's an amazing artist.
Yes, he is.
And
a great guy.
And yeah.
He's another one that everybody loves.
Yeah.
I work with a few people that everybody loves, and it's very fascinating to just watch it on the sidelines.
That's right, because he worked on the was it Kid Code comic, right?
Kid Code. He's working on Blue Hand Mojo right now. Jason Rodriguez, and I did APB, and then he and I have been talking since the beginning. Mm-hmm. So he was one of the people that I approached with Mothership. I asked Edward Austin Hall to help me with it, and then I asked John, if he could lend his name, saying I'm involved in it. Yeah. So he's been there since the beginning.
Yeah, and he is an amazing artist. He's got a really good art book out too.
Yeah. Oh, Pitch Black Rainbow.
Thank you.
How did I forget about that? Yes.
Pitch Black Rainbow.
Pitch Black Rainbow as well. Also a Rosarium book.
Great guy.
Yes.
Great guy. And Kid Code is an astounding comic.
Yes.
I think you're described as what, a hip-hop Doctor Who?
Hip-hop Doctor Who. And not to plug another comic book company, but John is with his Kid Code partner, Damian Duffy. They're doing Kindred, a comic book adaptation for Kindred, Octavia Butler's.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's looking very good, too.
I didn't know he was involved in that.
Yes, he's doing Kindred and Blue Hand Mojo at the same time. Wow. He's probably doing it right now as we speak.
Since we brought it up, let's talk about Artists Against APB, Artists Against Police Brutality.
Yes.
Which is a collection of essays and comics tied to police brutality, particularly in the Black community.
Right. Well, that one started. That one started totally out of anger. Like I don't sit around, being the angry black man. Like I don't wake up every morning and go, man, I'm. But for this one, it was the Eric Garner no decision when they said that they weren't going to take those officers to trial, and I was just I wasn't surprised. I was still angry because it was such an egregious, and it was not only filmed. It wasn't like Rodney King, where it was grainy and hundreds of feet away. It was really about as close as you and I are. And so I was just so infuriated that I called John to rant, as I often do. And I said, we have to do this thing. And he was on it immediately. And I got off the phone with him and I called Jason. And I just said, we have to do this. And they both said yes. So it was like that night. And we didn't really give much thought to it, what it was going to be or how it was going to play out. We just had to think of who we were going to give the money to, which is the Innocence Project.
Right.
And that's kind of how it came about. We asked people, and all kinds of submissions flooded in, and through our different busy schedules, and things just kept happening. So that was the hardest part about editing it. The unfortunate thing is we could have just had, it didn't even need to be a book. We could have just had it be an open scrolling project and you could just go incident of the day. So that was the most difficult part about it, was when do we finally just say stop? So there were several things, like the girl at the McKinney pool party. There were a few other things that happened after submissions were closed that we just had to put in there, and it just kept going and going and going because it never stops.
Yeah, I was reading through it, and it's just like, it's one powerful piece after another. The essays are powerful. The comics in it, just, the whole thing was, I'm an old white guy.
I heard that.
And it just was eye-opening for me.
Right.
Really, it was something I knew about, but the way the essays were and reading the comics, it just for somebody like me, it put you there.
Good.
And I recommend for anybody to go find this.
Yes, I hear that it's a very painful read.
It is. It's, yeah.
Well, it's sort of like Ashley's picture of the family portrait, which I think basically sums up the entire project. Is like these things become abstractions and political arguments, and you kind of forget that these are actually people. Like, people die, like 3 a day, but that gets lost. And I think that that's the one thing that APB, I think, really does, is it shows that these are people. There are a lot of women who contributed to APB.
Oh, yeah.
There's like a lot of stories about this is what it's like raising a child, having to tell them, male or female, that you may one day die, or that you have to be careful.
Yeah, don't wear that because...
Right, and you have to tell your son, and I have to tell my daughter. And these are very painful things when you think about it. Like, most people don't think about it. Like, I have a daughter, she's 8, right. But one day I have to tell her that if she's in trouble, she might not want to go to the police.
Yeah.
Because she might be in more trouble.
Yeah.
And for a democracy, if you really want to think about that, where we have whole populations of people where parents have to tell their children, don't go to the police if you're ever in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's serve and protect.
Yep. And there was that one essay that was, you mentioned the women writing it, that was just about her picking her kids up at the mall.
Yes.
And it's not that anything happens in it, but it was what she thought and what she looked for, and just going into the mall and picking her kids up and seeing a police car in the parking lot.
APB is one of those things where that made me have to apologize to my mom. Sorry I had you worrying like that. I had no clue. But it's true. I'm very proud of that.
You should be.
I'm very proud of everything that we do, but I'm very proud of that because nobody else seemed to step up to do that.
Yeah.
Which might be why we're here.
Yeah. maybe it
Rosarium,
is.
that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now let's talk about one of the other anthologies before we move into talking about some comics.
Okay. Okay.
And that's The Sea is Ours. Fascinating idea for an anthology.
Yes.
It's steampunk.
Yes.
We were talking about this earlier, and it's Asian steampunk. It's not just Asian.
It's
Southeast Asian steampunk,
Right.
kind of non-colonial.
Yes. Oh, anti-colonial. I would say.
Anti-colonial, yeah.
Yes. Well, it's really funny because Jamie Go was in Mothership,
Yeah.
and I was already familiar with Joyce Chung's work because of Mothership. She was one of the authors that I read when I was looking for authors, and I really liked that, both of them. And one day they were on Twitter talking about representation or complaining about lack of representation and how steampunk from people of color is often shunned by editors and publishers. So while I was reading it, I was like, hey, guys, why don't we do something? This was, in those headier days of beginning publishing when the realities of publishing don't smack you around for a while. And they said yes. So that's pretty much how that was born. I was like, give me an idea, let's bat it around and let's see what we can come up with. And that's what they came up with. And I said, well, nobody's done that one, I don't think, so let's try it. And fortunately, it came out as well as it did.
Yeah, it's just a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, why does steampunk have to be have to have Victorian trappings?
Don't look at me.
Yeah.
I don't really think that I look upon the Victorian era as anything romantic, either as an African American or as half Jamaican. I don't really look at. I don't look fondly upon the Victorian era at all.
Okay.
So I don't know why. That's for you to tell me.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, before we talk about comics, there's one other book I want to ask about, and that's Making Wolof.
Making Wolof.
Because your stuff is usually genre. It's usually fantasy, science fiction, something in, that kind of genre. But this is a crime thriller. Now, you've done this before because you republished The Jones Boys.
The Jones Men.
The Jones, yeah.
By Vern Smith, yes.
Yeah, amazing book.
Yes, it is. Crime is another one of those genres that one, it says a lot about the social norms and mores of your society. I mean, crime is like one of those commentaries on that. And what's acceptable and what's not unacceptable behavior and deviance and all these things that are very interesting themes for me. Because in so many ways, things that people or writers or leaders that I've always admired at one time were considered deviant. So crime in a way is just a very interesting play on these things. So Tade also was in Mothership, and I thought that crime also could use more multicultural flavor as well. So when I read it, it was incredibly different. It was incredibly different, which is, for me, I guess being a DC boy now, Pelicanos is my favorite crime writer. Because it's not really about the crime, it's about all these other things. And I find that fascinating. And Making Wolof is a lot like that. It is about the crime, but it's more about the place where he is.
Which is West Africa.
It's a fictional West African country. Yeah. I was just totally captivated by it. I mean, anybody who's been an editor, who's read Slush, can tell you, it's just like, a lot of times you just read until you're stopped being interested. Sometimes that's the first paragraph, but very rarely is it to the end of the book. If I am sitting there and going like, oh, wow, this book just ended, then those are the things that I want to publish, right? And Tade's was I was just like, wow, okay. Because, I mean, especially when we talk about Africa, they're very staid and static images. And, as I said, if I see another white person enter Africa and a bunch of dancing Africans around them, I will lose my mind. But in every movie, this happens. There's dancing Africans. And there were no dancing Africans in this. So I was like, okay, this works for me. Okay, it's a bit more complicated than that, but but no, Tade is a wonderful writer, and he's mostly a science fiction writer. But this Making Wolof blew me away.
Cool.
So I had to publish it.
Well, let's start talking about some of your comics.
Okay.
Because I think probably most of what you published are comics, though that's been changing some.
I think it's leaning. It's hard to say, because comics are such a long process that I think we have more comics projects, but we haven't necessarily published more comics yet. But that is tilting a little bit more that way, and hopefully one day we'll be able to find some sort of balance in that.
And you're a comics guy yourself, right? Well, you used to draw. You used to
I
draw.
used to draw when I was a kid. I kind of think of myself more of a satirist
Yeah.
who likes science fiction and comics.
Yeah, looking back at your books. Yeah.
Yeah. But comics was one of my first loves.
Yeah. And while we speak, just recently, the 5th issue of Day Black
Yes.
came out, which
Yes. Oh, really?
I'm a
Yes.
huge Day Black fan.
Well, you should wait till you see number 6.
Oh yeah, it's heading.
Yes,
That's just it's a brilliant comic. Keith Cross.
Keith Cross. Yes, he's a tattoo artist out of Atlanta, and
Oh, that explains
yes.
a lot.
So basically, you're basically looking at his tattoo style when you're reading Day Black.
Yeah.
And then his sense of humor is all his own.
Yeah, and just for people that don't know, it's about a vampire,
Tattoo artist.
a black vampire tattoo artist who became a vampire when he was a slave,
Yes.
and is a tattoo artist because there's bleeding when you're a tattoo artist, and it's a way for him to get blood.
Yes, he's trying to live incognito.
Yeah.
So he, instead of killing people all the time, he draws their blood in while tattooing with his tattoo gun.
And the story gets, there's family involved and his past involved, and you see, back, when he was turned. It's really a powerful story, and it's just a trip to read.
Oh, I love it.
And
I love
his
it.
drawing style is like nothing else I've seen.
Well, it's hard finding unique projects.
Yeah.
It really is difficult. And Day Black is really, it's an incredibly unique thing. Like, Keith Cross is the only person who could ever tell that story.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful story, and he's incredibly talented. It's beautiful art.
Yeah.
So how could you resist it?
It's a unique story. It's a unique look. We talked about Kid Code a little bit,
Right.
and because that's who is that? That's John, and it's Stacey Robinson
And Damian Duffy.
Damian Duffy,
Yes.
and that just went everywhere. I mean, that book was just, you didn't know what the hell was going to happen.
Yes. I can't wait for number 2.
Yeah, you.
'Cause
Like
I'm curious too. Like, that's one of the
Yeah.
funny things. Like, I see it before everybody else, but I'm kind of wondering too what's getting ready to happen in all these different things.
I mean, I was trying to think of how I would describe the story. You described it as hip hop Doctor Who,
Right.
but it's
It's a lot.
a lot. It's like,
It's a lot. We could spend a half hour talking
yeah,
about.
it's a dense book.
Yes,
There's like a
it is.
lot of stuff in it.
Yes.
A really dense story, a dense world.
Yes, it's an idea every three panels.
Yeah, and it's great world building in it.
Yes.
It really is. It
It's been
really
going on
is.
for a while, but I think it's only going to be 3 issues.
Oh, okay.
If I remember correctly.
Okay, I got to keep my eyes open.
Yes.
And Blue Hand Mojo.
Well, that's John
That's
Jennings,
John Jennings again. I
It's-
haven't read Blue Hand Mojo.
Well, it's
need
a
to.
hoodoo noir, is what we're calling it. Set in 1930 Chicago. It's a
that's-
private detective selling his soul to the devil.
That's my wheelhouse.
Of course, Big Bill Brunsby.
Yeah.
But it's a private detective who sold his soul to the devil, and he's trying to get his soul back.
That's great.
Yes. Well, we try to do all these weird kind of things that you just generally don't see. That's our reason for existing,
Yeah.
is to give people things that they haven't really seen.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
When you do that, I'm
try.
gonna have to grab Blue Hand Mojo when I get home.
Yes. Well, that was the thing, right? You might not like it, or you might love it, but as long as you don't forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't with your stuff. And you got more stuff coming out.
Yes, we've worked really hard trying to build a family.
And while we're while we're speaking, you've got an Indiegogo campaign going
Yes.
to kind of help move you to another level.
Yes.
And you got a lot of stuff going on. You're a busy man, and you've been on the road.
If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly.
There you go. Bill, we have run out of time.
Okay.
I just want to let you know it's a pleasure having you here.
Great to be here.
And I'm hoping to see things coming from Rosarium for a long time.
Thank you.
And we'll have you back on.
All right. I'll be here.
All right.
All right.
Well, that's it for Fast Forward. So from all of us here at the studio, this is Mike Zipser saying, take care.